Oke, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thanks God. Alhamdulillah that today we can meet again in the second meeting regarding the subject of Indonesian history in the colonial time. A good evening, ladies and gentlemen, my student. Last week I have sharing with you related to how the Western countries, particularly the European colonialists, came and then intervened in the Indonesian archipelago. For example, from the Portuguese, Spain, the Dutch, and also Britain. I think today I would like to share with you related to the how the Dutch colonial came and then step by step, slowly but surely, finally intervene in the Indonesian archipelago. Because of that, allow me to share screen with you. Just a moment. Okay, it is clear for you? Okay, so let's see about the colonialism in Indonesia, particularly since the POC, Pyrenees Post Indies Company, or the Dutch East India Company, to the East India government or the Dutch India government. I think it is become our concentration in discussing about the history of colonialism in Indonesia, because as we know that the Dutch colonial occupied the Indonesian archipelago since the 16th century to the mid 20th century. Because of that, when there's the generally historians said that we are colonized by the Dutch government in the 300 years, 350 years, maybe it is true. If we see about the history of the Dutch colonial in Indonesia, because since the 16th century or 17th century to the 20th century. However, according to the Dutch scholar, for example, I forgot about the authors, but said that I think that is not true that Indonesian was colonized by the Dutch in 650 years. According to Dutch scholar, maybe the history of the Pax Nirlandica, it is meaning that Indonesian archipelago become the peace and order since early 20th century. Because of that, according to I remember about his name, G.G. Racing. According to Racing, maybe just 35 years. But however, let's about become the interesting discussion about his opinion, because if we see about the Indonesia as the unitary state, as the integral territory between one island and others, I think Indonesia was colonized by the Dutch government since the 16th and 17th century to the 20th century. It is right that our history, more than 305 years, colonized by the Dutch government. Okay, so how we can understand about the history of the Dutch colonial in Indonesia, particularly since the establishment of POC in 1902 to 1799 until the East India government or the Dutch government in 1801 to 1942. Let me see about the map of Indonesia. I think it is the map Indonesia. It is the large country, and there are the many main island. It is the Sumatra, it is Java Island, Kalimantan Island, Sulawesi Island, and so on. And how this Indonesian archipelago, step by step, slowly but surely, finally occupied by the VOC. I think to understand about this question, we see about the history of VOC ourselves. As we know that VOC was established in 1602 in Maluku Island. And of course, the main objective of the VOC is to monopolize about the spice, for the trading of spice particularly, and of course, not only spice, but also others crop, including pepper. And I think it is interesting to note here that in next period, the POC try to move his headquarters not in Maluku Island, but to Java Island. In this context is switching to the harbor or port in Java Island in order it is suitable for the POC government. In this case, since 1919, POC established his headquarters or fortress in the what we call as the Batavia, or former is the Sunda Kalapa. I think it is very important about the movement or moving the focus of POC from Maluku Island to the Java Island, because there are some of consideration. First of all, not only Java Island as the center of island in Indonesian archipelago, very strategically, and also because I think Java Island is the island what we call as the fertile soil. Tanahnya subur. Fertile soil is important. So in this case, it is not only the crop of spice, but also there are many the product of forest and also the product of other crop beneficially for the POC. So I think it is one of the consideration why POC should be move his fortress or the center of government from the Maluku Island to the Java Island. Another factor is about the population. As we know that Java Island has more the population. I think most population, more than 60% of Indonesian archipelago population concentrate in Java until now. So in the context of history of Indonesia, since the history of kingdom in Indonesia until the history of colonial in Indonesia, and also until now, population is very important as the force level, as the manpower, not only for the organized for the soldier, for example, but also in the context of history of colonial is for the tax. You know, tax, the pajak. I think it is become the income gathering for the Dutch colonial about the population. So Java as the what is had more population comparing with other islands, it is also become one of the consideration why the fortress or the center of administration of POC should be moved from Maluku Island to the Java Island. And as we know that, of course, the Indonesian archipelago, in the Indonesian archipelago area, there's many kingdoms. Not only, for example, in Java, there's the strong kingdom, like the Mataram kingdom in Central and East Java. Also the Banten kingdom in Western Java. And also in Sumatra, there's the Aceh kingdom. In South Sulawesi, there's the Makassar kingdom. Of course, in Maluku Island ourselves, there's the Ternate and Tidore kingdom. So in this context, how the POC finally should be negotiated and also finally also intervene with the some kingdoms in Indonesian archipelago. In this context, I think let's we see one by one about how POC should be what is patching with the Mataram kingdom in Java, for example. Of course, all kingdoms in Indonesian archipelago based on the Islam as the values or as the ideology in the kingdom. Because of that, there's the conflict between the Islamic kingdom in Indonesian archipelago in one hand and the POC in which the main objective of POC is to monopolize of the trade or commerce. Okay, as I have mentioned earlier last week that one of the weakness of the Islamic kingdom in Indonesia is about the what we call as the internal dynamic or internal conflict, particularly in the king succession, or how to transfer of power from the king in one hand to the prince in others. I think not all this transfer of power very well. There's still the problem, there's still the internal conflict about the king succession. In this context, we will see about the case of Mataram kingdom, case also the Banten kingdom, the Aceh kingdom, the Makassar kingdom, and others always became the internal conflict about the king succession or transfer of power from the king to the prince. Okay, as we know that one of the prominent kings in Mataram kingdom is Sultan Agung. Of course, Sultan Agung, it is become the stronger enemy for the POC because Sultan Agung tried to occupy and there's the competition between Mataram kingdom and the Banten kingdom. And the area of West Java, for example, also in the influence of the Mataram kingdom. Because of that, the establishment of POC in Jayakarta or in Batavia, it is become what is not comparable with the Sultan Agung. And in 1928, 1929, Sultan Agung and his army tried to invade the Batavia or POC, and unfortunately, the what is infighting from the Sultan Agung and his army, it is didn't succeed, and it is become one of the resistant history about the Mataram kingdom in one hand and POC in others. And as we know also, finally Mataram kingdom ourselves, what is became the internal conflict because after Sultan Agung passed away, he substituted by his prince, what we call is the Amangkurat I and Amangkurat II, and so on and so forth. And as we know, last week I mentioned about the tradition of power or transfer of power in the traditional kingdom, not only in Indonesia, but also around the world, particularly in history of Islam, that the growth of kingdom or the weakness of kingdom, it is based on the authority of the king in the center of kingdom, what is center of administration. If the king has the what is big power of a big authority, it's become the big kingdom. But if the king in the center of power, it is the weakness king, it is also will become the what is a little kingdom. So I think Mataram in the time of Amangkurat I, Amangkurat II, and others, it is become the weakness kingdom because they have the internal conflict. And in this context, I think POC try to intervene about the internal conflict in the each kingdom in Indonesia, including also the kingdom of Mataram in Jawa. As we know that POC ourselves not directly invade the Mataram kingdom, but the VOC what is sending the what we call as the resident to advise about the king in order can managing about his kingdom, in handle also maybe internal rivalry in Dutch kingdom, and of course the resident of POC will support the prince or the king who preferable in attitude with the POC political or economic interests. Because of that, I think since the Amangkurat I, Amangkurat II, and others, POC can what we call in the political sciences, I think, or in sociology science, as the concept of hegemony. Okay, so hegemony or domination is not directly invade the territory, but making affected about the power to others area. So by hegemony of POC or political domination and economic interest of POC about the Mataram, I think become the VOC what is can intervene about the Mataram as the great kingdom in Jawa. As we know also, when the Amangkurat II confront with the Trunojoyo from the Madura, and POC assisted the king of Mataram, and then the Priangan area in West Java from the Mataram king given to the POC. Because of that, what is the Priangan area or the West Java in 17th century, I think a transfer of power from the POC to from the Mataram kingdom to the VOC. And because of that, different with the Mataram, I think West Java, particularly the Priangan area, directly administrated by the POC until the region level, because from the regency level to the village, they are still administered by the local leaders or local chief. For example, Bupati, Wadana, Pati, Camat, Kubu, Kepala Desa, and so on and so forth. So I think how the POC intervene in the Mataram kingdom, it has become the pattern, political pattern to others kingdom in Indonesian archipelago, including also in Mataram kingdom. As we know that Mataram, I mean Banten kingdom. As we know that Banten, for example, had the prominent king, what we call as the Sultan Ageng Tirtayasa. But unfortunately, when they asked the king succession from Sultan Ageng Tirtayasa to Sultan Haji had a different attitude to the POC. And because of that, POC support about the Sultan Haji as the king of Banten, because his attitude is what is preferable with the political and economic interests of the VOC. If the kingdom is what is stable and there is not internal conflict like in Mataram or in Banten, for example, Makassar, in which there is the Sultan Hasanuddin as the prominent king. POC try to make the collaboration or the cooperation with the enemy of this kingdom. As we know that in this context, the rivalry or competition between the Makassar kingdom and Bone kingdom, this is become the POC finally intervened also and supported about the Bone kingdom to confront the Makassar kingdom. So in this context, I think maybe it is relevant about the policy of the divide and rule, or in what is Indonesian language, politik de pide et impera, politik adu domba, between one king and others, between one native rulers and others, because there's different of political and economic interests between kingdoms in Indonesia, including also I think about the Aceh. As we know, Aceh is the great kingdom in Sumatra, particularly with the prominent king Sultan Iskandar Muda. In this context, POC also try to collaborate with the Johor kingdom in Malay Peninsula, and with what is Malacca. And as we know, after Malacca occupied by the Portuguese, finally Portuguese defeated by the VOC, and Malacca occupied by the VOC. So because of that, I think it is very important how the policy of the VOC step by step and finally can intervene in each kingdom in Indonesian archipelago. Because of that, in 17th and 18th century, most of Indonesian territory, most of Indonesian kingdom intervened by the POC. Okay, so and last week I have also mentioned why the Islamic kingdom in Indonesian archipelago divided by the POC. I think it is not only about the difference in paradigm between the rational paradigm and maybe no rational paradigm, but also maybe it is also different in method, different in strategy, different also in weapon. As we know, science and technology in the Europe, because there's the Renaissance movement, it is become the colonial, Western colonial in the European countries become the modern power, comparing with what is Islamic kingdom example from the Morocco in North Africa until to Morocco in Southeast Asia. So I think it is the a different power between the West power in one hand, in which the modern in paradigm, and Eastern power in others, still the traditional in character or in paradigm. Okay, so and then as we know, in last 18th century, in 1799, POC became the bankrupt. There's the many factors why the POC become the bankrupt. One of the factor is the corruption. What kind of corruption? I think it is very important to note here that according to some historian, corruption caused by many factors. One of the factor because the salary of the what is administrative personnel of POC, it is the low salary. So the low salary, I think it is become the cause of the corruption. And as we know, I think since the POC established until the last of Dutch colonial government in Indonesia, that's more than 75% of the Dutch colonial personnel comes from the native people or native leaders. So the low salary for the native official in the POC and Dutch government, it is become the cause of the corruption. So maybe it is become the what is learning from history that the low salary, there's the what is positive correlationship between the low salary in one hand and corruption in others. It is one of the factors why there's the corruption in the POC area. I have read also the a book of history, including also maybe from the Reclaps book. There's the what is factor or the practice of the corruption in the time of POC is what we call as the maybe it is the as we know that in the time of POC, the region or the bupati and others should be cultivate many crop. Maybe the coffee, maybe the sugar, maybe the tea, and so on and so forth. And when this crop should be given to the POC, there's the the timbangan, maybe there's the corruption also in the timbangan. Okay, the the Wager, the scale Wager, and so on. So that, for example, they ask the 10 kilogram, but because they ask what is the low salary for the region, for the Bupati, giving to the POC just 5 kilogram, for example. So they ask corruption more than half or 50% in the case of many timbangan crop for the POC. So I think the corruption is become the main factor why the POC became the bankrupt in 1799. Okay, the next. How about the POC become the bankrupt? And then, of course, there's the transfer of power from the POC to the directly the Dutch government. But unfortunately, as we know that in the Europe ourselves, there's a war between the kingdom in Europe and the French Revolution. In this case, is the Napoleon Bonaparte. Because of that, the kingdom in the Europe, including also the Netherlands, they are occupied by the what is French Revolution. As we know that in the Netherlands, in the time they asked the king or Ludwig Napoleon. I think Ludwig Napoleon is as the brother of Napoleon Bonaparte, and because of that, as the king in the Netherlands, Ludwig Napoleon sending the admiral, what we known as the Herman Willem Daendels. Daendels, I think, is the governor in the Indonesian archipelago, particularly in Java. And one of the main tasks of the Daendels is how to defend the Java in order what is cannot be occupied by the Britain. In this context is, as we know that there's the rivalry between the Dutch colonial government and the British colonial government, and in 18th, 19th, and 20th century, I think Britain as the one of the superpower in the world in the time. Okay, so because of that sin, I think 1803 to 1811, there's the Daendels administration in Java, what we call as the Batak Republic. And as you know, one of the legacy of the Daendels in Indonesia, particularly in Java, is construction of the Great Road from the Anyer in West Java to the Panarukan in East Java. I think it is the what is infrastructure construction, particularly the Great Road in Java, in order can defend the Java Island from intervention of the Britain. But as we know that in 1812 or 1811? 1811, I think the Daendels, what is the Batak Republic, can defeat also by the Britain army. In this context is the of Raffles become the governor in Java. And as we know, also one of the legacy of the Raffles in the time, he can writing about the prominent book, what we call is the history of Java. Okay, so Raffles is also one of the prominent governor, general of Britain in Indonesian history, because his legacy also, particularly in the history, what is become one of the important legacy for Indonesian history. Unfortunately, as I have mentioned earlier in last week, that there's the London Convention in 1824 between the Netherlands and Britain, and based on the London Convention, there's the division between the colonial territory, between the Britain territory and the Dutch territory. Because of that, Bengkulu area, including also I think Java, should be changed. What is the territory with the Malacca, who occupied by the Dutch, and also there's many area, including in the north, Kalimantan, should be transferred to power or to the British area. So a Convention of London in 1824, I think it is very important, because based on this convention, there's the clear territory between the what we call is Indonesian territory and the Malaysia territory after these two nation states became the independent nation. Okay, so after there's the Traktat of London or the London Convention, Indonesia finally what is occupied and also administrative with the Dutch colonial government. In this context, as we know about what we call is the Kulturstelsel or cultivation system in Indonesia, I think since 1830 to 1870. What is Kulturstelsel? What is cultivation system? I think it is an introduction from the Dutch colonial government to the kind of a new crop or a new plant to the Indonesian society. For example, the crop such as tea, sugar, indigo. Do you know indigo? I think indigo is a kind of crop for making coloring something, maybe red, what is brown, green. It is from the indigo. I think the young generation now what is didn't familiar with the terminology of indigo, but in the 19th century, I think it is very important crop about the indigo, tea, sugar, coffee, and so on. But why the cultivation system or Kulturstelsel finally become what in Indonesian language tanam paksa or poached cultivation? Because this new kind of crop should be poached by the Indonesian population, particularly what is the people in the region territory. Poached should be cultivated about the new crop. For example, coffee, tea in Priangan, sugar, I think in Central East Java and other, including also rubber. So cultivation system became the poached cultivation because there's the obligation for the ordinary people, peasant labor, I think in the village, should be cultivated about the new crop needed by the Dutch colonial government. And as we know how this cultivation system became a succeed in the history of Indonesia since 1830 to 1870, because this is based on the traditional power honored by the region or the Bupati. As we know, in the traditional what is custom, or in the traditional what is power of the region, there's the what we call as the kerja wajib, mandatory work. Okay, and of course there's the what is obligation for the ordinary people to work to the region. And when the Dutch colonial government introduced about the new kind of crop, it is also become the mandatory work or kerja wajib. Okay, for the government, they have to fight for the region or the Bupati, but Bupati try to make this obligation is free for the ordinary people. I think it is become the history of succeed about the Kulturstelsel in Java Island. Okay, so of course the policy of Dutch colonial history, not only in 17th century but also in 18th and 19th century, there's the resistance from the what is Indonesian leaders. If in 17th century there's the resistance from the kings of Islamic kingdom in Indonesia, I think in 19th century there's also resistance from the local leaders. For example, in Java, in Sumatra, in Kalimantan, and others. In Java, for example, there's the what we call as the Java War or Diponegoro War in 1829 to 1830. In Sumatra, there's also the Padri movement or Padri War, led by Imam Bonjol. In Kalimantan, in Sulawesi, and others Indonesian archipelago, there's the resistance against the hegemony of the Dutch colonial government. And similar with the resistance from the king of Islamic kingdom in 17th century, I think the resistance from the local leaders in 19th century also what is suppressed by the Dutch colonial government. And however, about the success story, the Kulturstelsel or the cultivation system, it is very beneficial for the Dutch government, according to what is historical record. There's more than, for example, more than 300 billion gulden. I don't know, comparing with the currently what is money, but more than 300 billion. I think it is income from the Kulturstelsel, because before this system will be changed to the what we call as the liberal economic or the open door policy from the Dutch in 1870. So I think it is about the history of Kulturstelsel or the cultivation system in Java and in others area in Indonesia. And in the last 19th century, let we see about the history of liberal economy or the open group policy about the history of Dutch colonial in Indonesia. What is open door policy? I think it is about the different in managing of Indonesia island as the colony for the Dutch colonial government. I think the prominent motto about the liberal economy or open door policy in the time is how to manage the colony for money. So I think it is very important how the Indonesian archipelago should be exploited and maximized for the benefitly for the Dutch colonial government in economy. If the Kulturstelsel or cultivation system centralized by the government, but in liberal economy or open door policy, I think it is should be organized or exploited by the private government or the what is private sector. So I think for the government it is still very beneficial because by managing in the private sector, I think the Indonesian archipelago as the colony still giving the benefit in economy for the Dutch colonial government. I think it is in generally about Indonesian history in the time of colonial, particularly since the establishment of the POC in 17th century until the last 19th century. Before in the early 20th century, we will entering to the new era, what we call as the time of national movement in Indonesia or zaman pergerakan nasional in Indonesia. I think I have been lecturing you in more than 30 minutes. If any comment or any question, please from the representative of male student maybe, or representative of the female student.
I have a question, sir.
Saya izin bertanya, Pak.
Please, your name, please.
Oh, Doni. Silakan, Doni.
Oke,
Mas dulu. Apa saya dulu?
Doni saja dulu, enggak apa-apa.
Oke.
Dimas atau Doni?
Saya izin bertanya nggih, Pak?
Oke, please. Your name, please. Doni, nggih?
Yeah, my name is Doni Frisiarya Sahab.
Okay, please, Doni.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. As we know that we all say our Dutch arrived in Indonesia for the first time at Maluku Island, and after that moved from Maluku Island to the Java Island, with the recent population in Java 60% from all population in Indonesia. Then my question is, why the people in Java is more advanced for people in Maluku? But actually, the Dutch arrived in Indonesia for the first time at Maluku Island, not Java Island. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, thank you very much, Doni. I think it is very interesting question. So, as I have mentioned earlier in last week, that Cornelis de Houtman, what it comes to Banten, okay, in 1596, but I think Cornelis de Houtman, as the representative of the what is Dutch trader, I think, not directly comes to Maluku Island. From Banten, he sailing to the North Java and then to the Strait of Bali. From the Strait of Bali back to Netherlands. So because of that, I think based on also the information from the Cornelis de Houtman, Java is not as the center of spice. Because of that, in 17th century, the Dutch government established the POC in Maluku Island, not in Java, because the Maluku Island is the center of spice trade in that time. But after what is breeding the potteries in the Maluku Island, they asked the geographically, according to the leaders of POC, that of course Maluku Island is the center of the spice, but strategically Java Island is very important because center of trading, center of business, not only for the spice but also for other product of the rest, forest, for example. Because of that, they have moved the center of administration, POC, from the Maluku Island to Java Island. So one of the reasoning is not only strategically in geographical aspect, but also, as I have mentioned earlier, there's the amount of population. There's more than 60% population concentrated in Java. And population is very important, not only for the manpower or the labor, but also for the tax. Untuk kepentingan pajak, okay? There's the many pajak. So the history of pajak, I think it is not only the new phenomenon in the history, but also what is in the time of kingdom in Indonesia, PUC and so on. There's the important about the tax or pajak as what is income for the government. So I think strategically in geography, and also I think the manpower in this context is the population is very important, and it is become the consideration why the central of administration should be moved from the Maluku Island to the Java Island. Okay, Dani?
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Okay, you're welcome. The female representative student, please. Any question or comment? Okay, the silent. Okay, the male student representative.
Pak, saya izin bertanya.
Okay, please, your name, please.
Oh.
Tazkia. Okay, Tazkia, please. You can ask in the bahasa Indonesia or in English. It does not matter for you.
Izin menggunakan bahasa Indonesia ya, Pak.
Okay, please. Tazkia.
Ketika VOC mengalami pasang surut, Belanda itu tidak lagi menjadi negara yang superpower ketika EIC, sebuah kongsi dagang dari Inggris, mampu menjadikan Inggris menjadi negara yang superpower. Nah, mengapa EIC itu mampu menggantikan atau menggeser peranan VOC yang semula dapat menjadikan negara Belanda menjadi negara yang superpower, sehingga peranannya dapat tergeser gitu, Pak?
Okay, I think it is also a good idea, good question. As I have mentioned earlier in the last week, as we know that in 16th and 17th century, there's the Portuguese and Spain as the superpower. But because there's the internal conflict in Europe between the Portuguese, Spain, and also other kingdom, in 17th and 18th century, there's the Dutch or Netherlands as the superpower. But as in the 18th century, 19th century until the mid 20th century, until the Second World War, Britain as the superpower in the world. The question is why the Britain became the superpower, substitute the Dutch colonial government. And in other words, why the POC become the bankrupt in one hand, meanwhile the EIC is Indian company owned by Britain, succeed in the history of trading. I think maybe there's the many factors. One of the factors not only about the corruption in the POC case, maybe in EIC there's less of corruption. Other factor, I think it is about the approach and strategy, how to negotiate and occupy about the colonial territory in the world. As we know that between Britain and the Dutch colonial, similar in the administration, indirect rule, not direct rule, but in negotiation between the Britain colonial government and the native ruler, it is different with the Dutch colonial government. Dutch colonial government maybe what is negotiated or intervene with the hard method, you know, hard method. Meanwhile, the Britain colonial government with the soft method. And there's the what we call is the pepatah in Malay language, Laksana Belanda dapat tanah. What does it mean? It is Belanda categorized as the colonial, what we call is the serakah, greedy state, greedy colonial state, negara kolonial yang serakah. Ya. Comparing with the Britain, maybe because the soft state in approach to the rural, local rural in the world, because of that, the area or territory of the colonial Britain, it is not only in Southeast Asia, but also in Africa, others Asia territory, in Middle East, in North Africa, and so on and so forth. So it is one of the factor if we comparing between the EIC in one hand and POC in others, why the EIC is the history of success. Meanwhile, the POC become the bankrupt in last of 18th century. So I think it is my answer, and hopefully maybe you can read put a bibliography related to the history of EIC and history of POC to be compared between these two. What is the great company in the world, particularly in the 18th century. Okay, others? Maybe I think it is enough. Thank you very much. And we will switch our lecture from the Zoom meeting to the WhatsApp group. I would like to see about your brief comment in the WhatsApp group. Please ensure your brief comment is clear in your name. Particularly the last name should be written in the full name, not be abbreviated, because with this it is what is not accordant in the academic clinic. Okay, thank you very much for your attention, and we ending our lecture today by reciting together Hamdalah Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Thank you very much. We will meet again in next week. I would like to lecture you in next week in Malay language, okay? In Ipin Upin language. And maybe it is will become the last meeting with you in the last week. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
Waalaikumsalam
wabarakatuh.
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih, Pak.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, you're welcome. We can leave from this Zoom meeting.